Welcome back. All right, 8-year contracts. 8-year contracts always generate a lot of interest. And so I've got some recent ones on the board. I've got some that are expiring relatively soon and just a mix. I went with a mix. I've got 25 of them on the board. Honestly, I could have just kept going. I could have done multiple boards on 8-year contracts. And then the question gets asked about, well, why? Okay, so if you're a general manager, you want cost certainty. Cost certainty is really important. It's not just a buzz term used by Gary Bettman. It's what GMs and owners ultimately want. You want to know what your budget is for years to come. You don't want to be worried about it. And some GMs really don't want to sit down and have to negotiate and get into all the ugliness of it. So you want that 8-year deal. And if you're a player, well, you don't want to get traded a bunch of times. If you're married, you got kids, you want to be sure you're going to enroll them in school and know that they're still going to be in that same school, in that same city at the end of the year. And you don't want that uncertainty. So shorter term contracts, which were the way of the NHL not that long ago, which was 3-4 years. And I personally, just me, I think a 4-year contract's just fine. But I totally understand why teams and players have decided, no, we'll go the 8-year route. And then we get into the discussion of whether or not it's worth it. Well, it depends on the player and it depends on how you define whether or not that contract ends up being worth it. I think some general managers sign these contracts knowing darn well that the last couple of years of a contract, it may not have aged very well at the end of it, but as long as you get the Stanley Cup near the start, you don't care. As long as the team's really good, the player fits in, and you have that fiscal certainty at the beginning, I don't think they care very much either. They're aware that at the end of a contract, it may not be the same player. You'll often see them front loaded. So at the back end of the contract, actual money is a lot lower, making the contract easier to trade. The cap hit's still high, but the actual cash paid out is lower. So you can find a team that's in some kind of a rebuild or retool and get them to take on that contract, probably throw in a draft pick, and you should be okay. That kind of thing, right? So I wanted to talk a bit about unrestricted free agency too. So UFA now is age 27 or older, who or after they've accrued 7 seasons in the NHL. So when you hear about a rookie at some point this year and a team sending him down to junior or sending him over to Europe, and the idea being, well, they don't want to burn a year towards free agency, that's what they're talking about. So very often a rookie will reach around that halfway mark and that comments start up about, do they want to burn a year towards free agency and potentially see a kid go as a UFA at age 25 or 26. Most teams don't want to see that. Also, there's Group 6, unrestricted free agency. That's for players who are 25 or older who have 3 pro seasons and less than 80 games played in the National Hockey League. This is designed to make sure that a player isn't just buried in an organization and play their whole career in an organization where they don't get that break. So a player at age 25 hasn't had that chance to make it in the NHL because of the organization they're with. Then they get a chance on the market to pick up with a new team. Then there's also the non-qualified restricted free agent. So this is when they decide they're not going to keep that player anyways, and they just don't give him the minimum offer that's needed to keep him from becoming an unrestricted free agent. Now, unrestricted free agency at one point in time was at age 31. And I wanted to mention that too because free agency now is at age 27. And honestly, I think players would love to see it even lower than that and see it down to about 25. I don't think the NHL is going to go for that. So with free agency now being at I think a nice midway point between 31 where the NHL had it, and think about this. Basically, a player would become an unrestricted free agent at age 31 when their most productive years are behind them. So teams would pay them to these big money contracts, and I'm still talking about the late 90s, early 2000s, and those contracts would fail often because you're paying for what a player has done, not for what the player will do. General managers have smartened up. Now they pay for what a player is going to do. And sometimes it blows up in their faces, yes. But more often than not, those contracts age pretty well. So today, Jake Ottinger signs a contract worth $8.25 million a year. I'm wearing my Ottinger jersey. At least the cap hit's $8.25 million a year. He's 34 when that expires. So at goaltenders are usually really good until right around their mid-30s. Makes total sense. Dallas does not have to worry about the starting goaltender for a while. Carter Verhaeghe signs an 8-year contract extension with Florida, $7 million a year, bargain, yes. The eyebrow-raising part to me is that he's going to be 37 at expiry. So there's more risk, I think, with the Verhaeghe contract than with Ottinger's because he's 37 on expiry. And so if he experiences a downturn in his early 30s from a production standpoint, that contract could stand out as not necessarily being a great one for Florida. Although Florida, getting him to a $7 million cap hit, it is a bargain cap hit for what Verhaeghe did this past season. Jeremy Swayman, of course, $8.25 million cap hit as well. He's 33 on expiry. So when that contract expires, Swayman should still be a pretty good goaltender in the NHL. And for Boston, they do not have to worry about their starting goaltender position, arguably, for quite some time. Leon Draisaitl signs an extension, of course, with Edmonton that will pay him, it's a cap hit anyways, of $14 million, highest cap hit on the board. He's 37 on expiry. Now, I did mention with Verhaeghe there's some risk. Obviously, there's some of that same risk with Leon Draisaitl, the difference being Draisaitl, a superstar, one of the best players in the NHL, and could very well win Hart trophies and Art Ross trophies before his career is done. So the Draisaitl one, yeah, he's 37 on expiry. I don't see that as a huge risk. Pettersson, $11.6 million cap hit. A lot of discussion about him in this market. He's 33 on expiry, which is younger than a lot of these players are going to be on expiry. He does need to produce a little bit more to justify the $11.6 million cap hit. Not going to gloss that over. Now, McKinnon, $12.6 million cap hit until age 35. He's 35 when that contract expires for Colorado. So, yes, it's more money than Pettersson. I think it's a better contract than Pettersson's because he's 35 when that expires and Pettersson's 33. So there's the argument that, you know, the salary cap's going up. These cap hits should age really well as long as the salary cap keeps going up. So the fact that Pettersson's expires a little bit earlier, at least he's 33 rather than the 35 McKinnon's going to be, we'll see how it all turns out. Eichel is the soonest to expire on the board. It expires in 2026, so feels like that's a long time from now, but it's not. It's a $10 million cap hit for him. And when he signed it, I remember a lot of comments of he's done nothing, he's not worth it, this is a ridiculous amount of money, how in the world are you going to justify that? No team with a $10 million cap hit's ever had a Stanley Cup win. He's got a Stanley Cup, and he's only 29 when this expires. So for Eichel, in a couple of years' time, this contract expires, he's very likely going to get a raise. So the earlier that you sign this 8-year contract as a player, so if you can get that coming out of your entry-level deal, you're going to be a free agent younger, and you could make even more money. Pierre-Luc Dubois, a lot of discussion about this one, right? $8.5 million cap hit for him. He is 32 when that expires. And one thing to keep in mind with the Dubois contract and all the discussions about it, and most of these contracts is, because of their length, because of how much of the money that's tied up with these is in a signing bonus, which you can't buy out, these contracts are almost always buyout proof. So there's the cap hit that the team knows they're going to be paying for the next 8 years. And for the player, not only are you not worried about being traded that season, you also probably have a no movement clause, or at the very least a no trade clause, and the contract is not one that can get bought out. Not easily, anyways. Travis Konechny, $8.75 million cap hit for him with the Flyers. He's 35 when that one expires. And again, they've got him signed through all his prime years. The phrasing is always buying UFA seasons, so buying up seasons after they would be unrestricted free agents, because all of these players have said, we're not going to go to market. We're not going to become unrestricted free agents. And so the expectation is that the team might pay a little bit more than they otherwise might because they're buying that unrestricted free agency away from the player. Brock Faber, $8.5 million cap hit for him with Minnesota. He's 30 when that expires. So Faber, defenseman, really good defenseman, could cash in again at age 30 and maybe get a 5 or 6 year deal. Because one difference between now, again, and about 25 years ago, the guys in their early 30s generally are not being signed to these huge long-term contracts. They're much shorter in term. Dylan Guenther with the Utah team, and of course I'm using various decals now that I've turned into magnets that are Yeti related or Yeti adjacent. Guenther, a $7.14 million cap hit for him. He's only 29 when that expires. And as we've seen early in the season, Dylan Guenther is projecting to become one of the more exciting young players in the NHL, a star in his own right, and that cap hit could look like a huge bargain as soon as this coming summer. I did try to restrict this to one per team, so if there's a contract that's missing that you want to talk about, I did try to restrict this to one per team because, again, there are a lot of 8-year contracts in the NHL right now. Yuri Slafkovsky with Montreal parlays what was a pretty good second year in the NHL to a $7.6 million cap hit. He's only 28 when that one expires. So again, he gets signed in earlier. Montreal gets a contract that may very well be a bargain with Slafkovsky's production, going through the roof. And he's able to cash in at age 28. So 28, you got to think he could get a 6 or a 7-year extension. These guys are signed till age 35. GMs may very well be interested in Slafkovsky when this contract's done. He could get a huge raise from that $7.6 million cap hit at the end of the deal. Rasmus Dahlin, $11 million cap hit for him with Buffalo. He's only 31 on expiry. Defensemen, it does feel like are better later in their careers than forwards. It feels like your oldest players are often going to be the defensemen, the goaltenders. Goaltenders can play well into their mid-late 30s. Defensemen as well. Forwards, not necessarily as often, but again, when you're talking about an 8-year contract, this is going to eat up a lot of their career either way. Brandon Hagel, $6.5 million cap hit. There was a lot of chirping around that contract when Tampa signed it. He's 33 on expiry, but that $6.5 million cap hit, you compare it to anything else on the board, I think it's aged really well. And Hagel is a very productive top 6 forward for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Jonathan Huberdeau, that's a contract that we've discussed before. $10.5 million cap hit. He's had a strong start to the season, but one thing that was pointed out with that contract when it was signed, he's 37 when that expires. So it is one of those contracts that, unlike a lot of the others on the board, obviously Draisaitl's, he's 37 on expiry too, it is seen as risky because you're buying up seasons in his mid-30s. The cap hit's still pretty darn high, and so the odds of a regression in his numbers, it's there. It's pretty high because while there are certain players that are still very productive into the mid to late 30s, it feels like that's rare. Bo Horvat, $8.5 million cap hit. A lot of chirping around that contract when it was signed too. I debated about whether or not to put Barzal's up. I put Horvat's up instead. He's 35 when that expires. And again, you look at Horvat's got the same cap hit as Dubois. It's obviously above the goaltenders here. It's the same as Faber, same as Hellebuck, same as Meyer. I still think Horvat's contract is fine. You might want some more production for that cap hit, but I think at this point, it's fine. I'm not saying it's great, but right now I think it looks all right. Stützle, $8.35 million cap hit. He's only 29 when that contract expires. So again, Ottawa gets all their young guys signed, long-term contracts. For all the, back and forth about Canadian teams and everything, all of the Canadian teams have guys on long-term contracts and haven't generally had much trouble getting their young players signed. And Ottawa's a good example. Almost everybody in that young core is signed to a long-term contract. Now it's about becoming a playoff team, and Stützle is a key guy being counted on there. And at $8.35 million, I would say you're getting good value compared to some of these other contracts. Connor Hellebuck, $8.5 million cap hit. It's interesting, too, because I did the video a couple weeks ago on goaltenders and how much they're getting paid, and since then, they've been paid pretty well. But it is noteworthy that Ottinger, Swayman, just below what Hellebuck makes. Ullmark didn't get an 8-year contract, but he signs for just below what Hellebuck makes. So maybe Hellebuck's at the market. But Hellebuck's contract, he's 37 on expiry. Again, that's old compared to some of the other guys. But Hellebuck, a Vezina-winning goaltender, we know how darn good he is. And I don't think there's any expectation that his play is going to fall off once he gets into his mid-30s. That's not the expectation anyways with him or with the team, and I don't expect that either. Timo Meier, $8.5 million cap hit. He's 34 when that contract expires. And at the time that was signed, I thought it might be a little bit high, but now looking at it around the other contracts, it's right in around where a lot of the other ones are. And Timo Meier, a good top 6 forward. Top 6 forwards are not cheap anymore. Now we know starting goaltenders aren't cheap. Top 4 defense, same thing. The one thing to keep in mind with this is when the cap hits are where they are and the contracts are so long, I end up feeling bad for the guys who are, fringe players, bottom 6 forwards, bottom 2 defensemen, because there's not much money left for those guys, and teams will try to, squeeze a little bit of money out of that bottom six to pay the top six, right? Brandon Montour, contract that he signed with Seattle, $7.14 million cap hit. I think there's some risk to this. I do. He's 36 when that one expires. So again, the contracts that I look at and think, well, there's some risk there. Generally, they're the ones that are signed by a player who is older. In Montour's case, we'll see if he plays as well in Seattle as he did in Florida. If he does, they'll be fine. Seth Jones, a lot of talk about this contract, of course. $9.5 million cap hit. He's 35 when that one expires. There's discussion now about whether or not it's too high. One thing that's kind of kept that contract out of discussions, though, while everybody is talking about Darnell Nurse and Edmonton often, is the fact that Chicago's not in any kind of cap crunch. So that definitely causes less attention to be paid to the contract signed by Seth Jones. But when Chicago starts getting better and some of these young guys need to get paid, like Bedard, etc., we may be talking about Seth Jones's contract again. Peter Forsberg. Peter Forsberg retired a long time ago. Philip Forsberg. I almost said Anton too, and I'm like, it's not Anton. It's almost like I'm in a Stastny mode here. But yeah, Philip Forsberg, because there was Peter Stastny, Anton Stastny, and Marian Stastny. There's so many names that get stuck in my head at this point that sometimes I spit out the wrong one. Philip Forsberg, $8.5 million cap hit. Yeah, that's a bargain. He's 35 when that expires. So again, signed a little bit older than some of the other players on the board. But considering what Forsberg's been able to do the last few seasons in Nashville, that's a very smart contract. It's a very good deal. Severson in Columbus, maybe some risk to this, $6.25 million cap hit. It's interesting, too, that there seems to be a certain cap hits where people start getting more, tougher on the players. And it feels like about $5 million and up, but at $6 million and up, it really gets loud. Severson, he's 36 on expiry. And I understand some of the trepidation around the contract when it was signed. I think he's been good, though, in Columbus. And again, Columbus is a team that obviously is not currently in some sort of a cap crunch. So the contract's not bad by any stretch. I do think that when we talk about bad contracts, it depends on the team and their cap situation. But Severson, definitely been some discussion since he signed that contract about his worth. You guys can let me know your thoughts. And then 2 for the price of 1 for St. Louis, because I kind of had to. I was just going to put up Kyrou. I was like, let's just put up Kyrou. And I thought, well, no, because Kyrou and Thomas got exactly the same contract. So Kyrou and Thomas both make they both get a cap hit of $8.12 million. On expiry, Kyrou's 32, Thomas is 31. So younger than a lot of the other guys on the board here when it got signed. Definitely contract signed for what the player's going to do. And that's the case with both Kyrou and Thomas. It does mean there's going to be growing pains in their careers, like Kyrou had a pretty slow start to the season this past year. But the idea is that you're signing them for those 8 years. You're going to have those growing pains, but eventually those contracts look like a bargain. And again, comparatively speaking with other contracts on the board, and as long as Kyrou and Thomas are both productive, I think those contracts are understandable. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you haven't done so already. And just let me know how you feel about 8-year deals. It is part and parcel now of how the NHL does business. I don't think that 8-year contracts are awful or stupid or anything like that. I think they're understandably part of how business is done now. But let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe in the event you've not done so already. And I could probably just erase this board and put up another 25 8-year contracts. Maybe I do that tomorrow. Stick around and find out. Let me know your thoughts on the 8-year deals. Hit like and subscribe, as I said. And if you haven't done so, all right, that's fine too. But thanks for all your support either way. I will talk to you again soon.